Mm. We're up in five. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM. Nope. I'm going to start again. Had something else that came in my mind. Okay, we're up in five. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you on No King's Day. Wow. As Chicago continues to really come alive, there is now a request by the president for uh, the case to see whether the National Guard can be deployed here. And it's very interesting that he wants to deploy troops from other states. It's like setting states up against each other, which is something you really don't want to do because the last time we did that, we had a civil war, right? So let's talk about all of that. Let's talk about the sense of unrest and unease in the Chicagoland area in particular. Many people are looking over their shoulders. Some people still don't think that they could be detained, that they could be put under arrest. I don't know how that really works with ICE, but Attorney Tanya Woods from the West Side Justice Center can help us to understand who has the power to arrest, who has the power to detain, what you do when that happens, or if that happens to you. The likelihood is increasing that citizens and non citizens alike will face this kind of treatment. Indeed, we just saw at a Walgreens on the south side of Chicago a 19-year-old Black American boy who was chased in the store and brought out and put on the ground forcibly, face down. And when his relatives shouted, "He's a citizen, he's a citizen, he's a citizen," the ICE agent responded belligerently, "Get the blank out of here. You don't know what the blank you're doing." And the situation escalated. And so there's that. And then we have a Florida man who was an ICE agent, who is an ICE agent, who was inebriated. And he had his two children in the car. He was pulled over by the police. The police wanted to know, "Are you all right?" And he became belligerent. And then when the Black partner of the white police officer approached the car, the ICE agent wanted to know, "Are you Haitian?" And the response from the police was, "That does not matter. We want to know if you are all right because you're driving in a way that has drawn suspicion that perhaps you're drunk." And it turns out that he was. But interestingly enough, it was his concern that his sons not be left alone. But many ICE agents are leaving sons and daughters of people they are taking away. They're leaving them alone, sometimes on the street. We've got a lot to unpack here on No King's Day. And my mother said, "It really," she said, "that's getting a little too close to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King for me." She said, "What about no dictators?" And she said, "Because, whether you like it or not, people like kings and queens. We still have Miss America and on and on and on. And we get excited by the royal family. But what you don't want is a dictator." My mother thinks on a deep level, Attorney Tanya Wood. She said, "Wait, stop,
Yes.
stop." She
Yes.
said, "You're getting too close to Martin Luther King for me." She said, "Because I'd like him all day long and twice
Yes.
on Sundays."
Yes.
So let's look at that. Let's look at the police, the local police who increasingly are protecting the demonstrators. I even want to be careful with my language about that because protesters, which is language that has been put forth by the corporate media, there's a tinge of violence. I
Mm-hmm.
believe in peaceful protest, but these people are demonstrating their opinions. So, what about demonstrators?
So
And
let's
so,
talk about.
everybody, like and share, like and share.
Mm-hmm.
Want everyone to reach out to us. Please go to the Santita Jackson Show uh, on YouTube. Many of you are here right now, and you all sharing throughout the week. So, I want to thank you for that because we look up and we get millions of views over the course of a few weeks, and we want to thank you for that. But continue to like and share Santita Jackson IG. on Instagram, the Santita Jackson and Friends page on Facebook. Please share, like, and share there, like, and share there, at Santita J on X. And so, my beloved sister friend, where do you want to begin? Because there's a lot. You've had quite an exciting day at Rainbow Push, and you want someone I have known since I was one,
Jeez.
Diane Nash Bevel, the
Yes.
wife of Reverend James Bevel, indeed, one of the great heroines um, of the freedom movement. And indeed,
Yes.
she and her husband are part of the reason that we are able to be here today.
Yes.
Oh, you showed me that when I saw that
Oh,
picture of you, I said, bless her heart. She
yes.
was Diane Nash Bevel.
Yes, yes. What a day to start. A way to start the day, I should say. I had the honor of
Absolutely.
being on a panel with Ms. Nash, Top Ladies of Distinction and Akarama Foundation hosted a Democracy Now and Then. What lessons have we learned and where are we going? And especially and not lost on me on this No King's Day. And we'll, Ms. Jackson, tell your mom we'll figure out a new name that can that's more appropriate. But I say that to say because she is a living legend.
Mhm.
She's not someone that's been taken from us, very soft spoken woman, but has huge words to lay upon us. And so I feel very privileged to be in that space this morning with her. And so it's upon her shoulders we stand today. There was a lot to unpack. Santita, you talked about a lot of things, protesters, violent or otherwise, or perceived violent. You talked
Mhm.
about the person who was chased into a pharmacy and people shouting out, he's a citizen, and just this kind of chaotic, what I am feeling and a lot of people are feeling, that we are in a moment of such tension and what feels like martial law, regardless if they call it that or not. But you also brought up some issues about being detained, who has the right to the authority to detain. And we're literally talking about the management, mismanagement, the uh, just bringing black bodies in a space and controlling black bodies and how we move around is kind of the central theme of all of this. We are being forced, some people feeling forced like they have to stay inside out of fear, people feeling like they cannot exercise their constitutional right to speak up out of fear. So our bodies are being controlled, our thoughts are being controlled, our voices, or at least there's an attempt to control it. And so I'd like to spend some time talking about how we can fight back against that in a way that keeps us away from harm. So the first thing you talked about was who actually has the authority to make these arrests. The president said back in the late August, early September, that he was sending the National Guard to curtail crime and violence. That was what the initial promise was made, was that he was sending the National Guard to curtail crime and violence, and that there was some very attractive, he keeps referring to them as attractive and beautiful black women wearing red MAGA hats that actually called him to come to Chicago.
Mhm.
Which I find inflammatory for a number of reasons and objectifying on a physical level. But that was the original call. But instead, that Labor Day weekend, we saw a deluge of Border Patrol law enforcement agencies under the guise of enforcing immigration policies. And their goal was to find criminals who were undocumented, and meaning in this country without permission, who were criminals, in order to stem the tide of crime and violence. And so what happens is, what we've been seeing now are these raids, these in the moment, no precautions of Border Patrol agents dropping in on communities, and they'll just start chasing somebody. And they roll in with all their vehicles, and then people are in a state of chaos trying to figure out who are they after and what are they trying to do. While
Well,
in this,
hold that thought because
sure,
it brings to mind something I saw on
yeah,
CNN just last night. You have people in the neighborhood who formed rapid response teams, and this young man, Mr. Martinez, out in California, is part of one of those rapid response teams. An unmarked vehicle was following him and slammed his car, damaging it. It turns out it was ICE.
mm-hmm,
Who does that? I mean, I feel
mm-hmm,
like this is the KKK. I mean,
mm-hmm.
they're masked, they're not
So
identified. I mean, help me to understand this.
So that's exactly, and that's what I was going to juxtapose in this picture of what we're seeing in Chicago. So that's going on at the same time, where these high speed chases are happening with vehicles that are unbeknownst to us, with people who we don't even recognize what they're wearing. Many of them are masked and doing so in a very guerrilla type fashion,
Yeah.
right? Which is wreaking all sorts of chaos and havoc. But more importantly, here's the irony: they are bringing the violence to Chicago. We mustn't lose sight of that. This individual, our president, is saying that he's coming to stem the tide of crime and violence when actually he's doing the opposite. He's creating violence. He is bringing people who are bringing violence to our communities, and then saying he's doing that to protect us. That is not protecting us. It's not
But
keeping us
hold that thought, because let me ask you. I mean, just because I want to unpack this, because you say a whole lot in a very
in
short.
just a short period of time.
You do,
Yes.
because I can't identify them, which is problematic. There
Yes.
are many who are impersonating ICE agents. And if you ask them for identification, they're belligerent. They don't give it to you. And I just want to know, how do I even know that what I'm dealing with is real?
You may not know if they are working under the color of law. You may not know that. And so this is why I'm going to take this next point of liberty, is that what we are trying to do as organizers, activists, and service providers is keep Black people safe in this moment when you don't know. There are a lot of unknowns that are happening. We are taking photographs of uniforms and sharing that information. We are asking people, when it is safe to do so in a way to take down a badge number or a name or take a photograph, if you can do that, and then share that with those of us who can then share that across the community on broad scale. But you may not know. And so the advice we're giving are information about exercising your constitutional rights that keeps you safe, first of all, and farthest from harm, and also the people that you are with, so you can actually walk away from that situation to live another day, to tell others how to keep themselves safe. We don't always know, but what we are doing is circulating photographs, and along with our Know Your Rights education, of what some of these uniforms look like.
Mhm.
That's why you will see here in Chicago, there's a lot of video being taken by people who have been trained to know how to go into a situation and safely take video, safely write down badge numbers and names where they're able to see it, so that then they can get that in the hands of those of us who can proliferate it and share it, so that when we hear the lies that are being told by our government about what's actually happening, we can counter that with actual real information and videos of what we are actually seeing on the street. So when
Do you have the
somebody's
right? Look, do you have the right to ask them to present their identification to you?
You do have the right, but here is what I'm encouraging people to say. And you heard this on your show a couple of times. Do not take the moment of engagement as the moment to litigate. While you have the right, you must first know what your risks are. So keep the 3 R's in mind: know your rights, but know your risks, and then know your resources. So are you going to put yourself in further danger by asking for identification? Are you going to put yourself in further harm? Who's with you? We have some activists who want to go out and protest and activate their civil rights so that they can be heard. But many of us don't all share the same amount of privilege or share the same amount of risk. And so you want to know, if I then step up to this law enforcement agent and ask for this identification, is that going to exacerbate and escalate the situation, or is that actually going to bring tempers down? And who's with me? Is this going to draw fire to the people? And are we sharing the same amount of risk? I am an attorney, Black woman. I might have a different risk than this person next to me who is a undocumented person, or somebody who is a re-entering citizen with a criminal background, or my kid who's under 18. So while you are out in the streets, depending on what you are doing, that's going to determine how you should move around and have your being. So when you are engaging with law enforcement, that is not the time to litigate. That is the time to stay calm, exercise your constitutional rights effectively and firmly, but know when it's time to actually, you want to be able to stay calm enough to be able to walk away. Because if you are detained, then you're going to need to know what to do next. And that is contacting a lawyer or having a loved one do so for you.
Well, I keep going. I know I'm going back to this young man who
That's
was
okay.
on one of these, who was just part of a rapid response team, neighborhood team. And the way he told his story yesterday in the interview, it sounded like he was being observed by ICE. That they were following him, and well, he was following them, and they were observing him. And but the Attorney Woods, they rammed his car, and literally they drove in a circle for more than a minute in the middle of the street. This is bizarre. You can't make this stuff up. They rammed his car. He had to stop the car because someone rams your car from the back. What are you to do? What would you advise someone to do in a situation like that? And he was injured, but they took him into custody. Um, my question is, who are you? Where are you taking me? And particularly as a person of color, and I would even say as a woman of any color, because women are particularly vulnerable. I don't care what color you are. What is it? What are you doing? Who are
May
you?
I may I please ask you all, for those who are hearing, those are the natural questions that you want to ask. You will know very quickly whether or not you're going to get answers to those questions or not. If you are not getting the answers to those questions, do not continue to ask those questions. That's when you actually want to be quiet. That is when you actually want to enforce constitutional right number one, and that is I will not talk without my lawyer. Because anything, literally anything and everything that you say after that can be used and will be used against you in a court of law, whether you did anything wrong or not. On the street, in the moment, in the heat of that moment, is not the time to assert the fact that you've done nothing wrong. That is not that time. Leave that for us as the lawyers to be able to come back and fight for you in a court of law. In the moment, in the heat of the moment, that's when you are saying you will not talk without your lawyer. You can ask the question, am I free to go? Where are you taking me? And in short order, you will know whether or not you're going to get a straight answer. You will either be asked more questions, you will be peppered with more questions, you will either be shouted at, or someone will raise their voice at you, or they will make it very clear that they're going to take your person and take control over your body, which is what I spoke about earlier, and take control over your body and detain you. This is where you stop asking, where are you taking me? And you literally will start to assert your constitutional right and say, I will not talk without my lawyer. Your second constitutional right that I need you all want to do is to be able to say, I will not consent to any searches, because that means that when they are trying to search your person, your car, your body, or wherever, or your home, that then if you are asserting your right not to consent to any searches, that allows us as attorneys to be able to take anything that is discovered in that search and have it thrown out of a court of law and not used against you. So what I am encouraging everybody to do, including your caller Solomon, what we are talking about is keeping Black people safe. This is not about illegal migrants. This is not about undocumented people. This is about keeping Black people safe. Because one thing that, Santita, you are bringing to light is that Black people are being caught up in these raids. Black people's cars are being rammed into. Black people are fleeing scenes
Oh,
where
for the
they are,
record, he was Latino in California, but he
right.
presented as absolutely as a person of color.
That person did that person
Yeah.
absolutely did. But there are other Black folks that are, I'm thinking about the situation that we had outside of California in Harrison,
Mm-hmm.
and where folks are being caught up that are not, right? So we have folks that are still getting caught in these melees, and what can happen at the end, some people are being released. You asked that question. The people that are not supposed to be detained are getting released, and that is a good thing. But we are monitoring these situations as they happen in the moment, because we cannot predict how these Border Patrol agents are going to behave or what they're going to do in the heat of the moment.
But some people, once they are detained, they're being taken
Mm-hmm.
to the detention centers, not to the
Yes,
police station.
that
So,
is true. Right. So if you are being detained and they do end up taking you, you might be being taken to Broadview. Some people are being taken and then
which
they're
is
being
in the
shipped out.
Chicagoland area, because we have.
Yes, that's in the Chicagoland area, and is the
Okay.
subject of many court cases because of the fence that the Border Patrol government had erected to separate the facility from the protesters that were outside. And so that has been an ongoing court case as well. So a lot of attention around the Broadview facility, which is right outside Chicago. So yes, some people are being taken there. Some people, when they are being detained, and then if they are legitimately being, and by legitimate, I mean whatever the why they were, the reason for their detention in the first place, the reason why they are undocumented and living in this country without documentation. Some people are being immediately deported to other countries. So we know that folks are being deported to Mexico, to other Latin American countries. And then some people who are being detained and threatened with deportation are being threatened to be deported to countries in Africa as well. And that's real, and that's
Well,
happening.
whatever your background, you're being sent a lot of different places. They're not just sending Black people to Africa, they're sending people away from home.
Yes.
Because now we're beginning to see the local police pushback. There are lots of videos. They're proliferating like wildfire, on TikTok and in social media, where people are pulling out their phones, they're pulling out their cameras, and they are documenting interactions between local police and ICE. And it seems that more and more local police are protecting the demonstrators. Did you expect that to happen?
Well, it's interesting you would say that because in the beginning, what we were seeing were instances where local police were actually coordinating and cooperating with Border Patrol and with the federal agents. And I'm just going to use federal agents as a way
Mhm.
to highlight the fact that it doesn't really matter what agency they're from. What we're seeing is Border Patrol right now, but we could see IRS agents tomorrow. But they are working under the color of law of the federal government, because there are any number of federal agencies that have their own law enforcement arms and entities. So what we're seeing today is Border Patrol, but I don't want people to think that that's where it may stop. We might see any other federal agent working under the color of law around these enforcement efforts. So federal agents is what I mean for the larger whole.
Mhm.
And that being said, then, those individuals are acting in a way that gives them the right and the authority to detain people and to take them wherever detention centers that they can go. But what we're trying to say to family members is, if you are armed with the information about knowing your resources, meaning hotlines and phone numbers that you can call these hotlines, and then we on the other side can try to find your loved one if they have been detained, and find out where they're being held, where they're planning on, if at all, if there are deportation proceedings that they may be facing, and more importantly, where they can get legal assistance.
As we're looking at this, it seems like this is evolving. It's an evolving situation. Where are we? Where do we begin? Because, well, I can say we began with the request by the president to bring federal agents and into various cities, but also to federalize the local police. I don't know if they're going to be able to do that here and in Portland and all around the country, because the local police live with people. And I think that is why they're trying to deploy Texas National Guards men and women to Chicago, because they're not from here, and there is a cultural divide. There shouldn't be,
But
but
there is.
but
Yep.
there.
And right now, the Texas National Guard, they're staged outside of Chicago in a suburban area. They've not yet been deployed, but we're told that they're here in the state. But they don't have any immediate orders, if you will, or instructions as to what they're supposed to be doing, and that's being litigated as well. So
Mhm.
I'm glad you
Wait a
pointed
minute,
out
to
that.
the Supreme Court, right?
Yes,
Would you please speak
yes.
to that? The president did what?
So right, so what we have is right, the National Guard in Texas has been deployed to Illinois to be able to do the thing that the president told us he was going to do back in September, which is deploy the National Guard to curtail the rampant crime and violence that he claims that he's going to clean up in Chicago. However, but they've not been given any instructions as to what they should do or how they should do it. And so there is a court case that's saying that they shouldn't be here, that they're from a whole other state. They shouldn't be here. They should not be allowed to actually do anything here. And what we're all anxiously waiting to see is, while these court cases are going on, so many simultaneously, they all feed off of each other. So what's happening here in Chicago is feeding off what's happening in Oregon. Oregon is looking at what we're doing in Illinois, and SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States, is looking at what all these district courts are doing, because these are all federal courts. And so the way our court system will work is that whatever happens at the trial court level, so folks like your Honorable LaShonda Hunt, Honorable Sarah Ellis, and others at the federal level, those will then be appealed at the federal level. And then the next court of law would then be the Supreme Court. So that's why we're all paying so very close attention to what's happening in these federal district courts across the country, because these are all fights that could lead up to SCOTUS. And SCOTUS is right now looking at all of the fights that are happening across the nation and trying to figure out, as if I were in their shoes right now, what strategies they're going to employ or deploy, and what instructions, more importantly, in my opinion, are they getting from the president. And so we all have to be vigilant and watch all of these courts across the country and how they are feeding off of each other.
Well,
And
before. Oh,
may
I'm
I
sorry.
point out, many
Oh,
of the women that are sitting on the bench that are hearing these cases, they are women. and
Why
that
is that important?
commonality. It's important because they are looking through a very unique POV. And so what we saw were some um, district court judges that were appointed by Trump, not necessarily ruling lockstep with what we believe to be the Trump philosophy. So that is important because that says to me that there's some moral compass that is acting in some of these courtrooms that is superseding the rhetoric and the philosophy that's coming out of the White House. And I just hope that, and many of us are hoping that people's just common decency and moral compass will win out over all of this political rhetoric. And so I'm paying close attention to the fact that these women are the ones that are deciding many of these cases. And I want our viewers also and people who are listening to be paying close attention to these races that are coming up, your congressional races, because your Congress is who will then affirm any of the appointments that are made by the president so that they can even sit in the seats that they are sitting on. So every vote that you cast has a ripple effect, not only for the district that you sit in, but also they have a hand in confirming any district level, any federal court judges that the president may put up for appointment.
Well, you know what? As we bring up Dr. David Gibbs, brilliant historian, The Revolt of the Rich. That's what we're seeing. You got to get his book on Amazon as we are talking, continuing, adding to this discussion that we've been having with attorney Tanya Woods, executive director of the West Side Justice Center. It's based in Chicago, but everybody, you can call her and reach out to them from any place in the country because we're seeing this is now a national problem. While you're seeing governors assert their states' rights, they're all looking at, like you said, they're all looking at each other. I saw a
Yes.
Republican governor, I think it was on ceasefire on C-SPAN, and
Mm-hmm.
while he supports the president, he said, but we should not put National Guards persons from other states and other states. We don't need to put Americans in opposition to each other. And I was really glad to hear him say that. And I think that we have to be very careful because you cannot assume anything about anyone's politics. That's the beauty of the Constitution because it covers us all,
That's right.
right?
That's
So
right.
help me to understand. And
Absolutely. And for people who are interested in getting palm cards, that ones that I've spoken about in their communities, you can reach us at 773-940-2213 at the Westside Justice Center. If you'd like to have those palm cards in your community to make sure that the people that you serve and live and work with have access to know what their rights are, how to enforce them, know what their risks are, and where they can get their resources.
well, I brought on Dr. David Gibbs, Attorney Woods, because I think that we need, and you obviously you can engage in this discussion. I want to broaden it out, or should I say, integrate into it the historical element, because many people are saying we've never been here before. I'm not so sure I would agree with that. I think that there's a turning point where we are. You always have an inflection point. Uh, as we look at governments try to figure out where they are, particularly an empire. My mother continues to remind me. She said, "We're about to turn 250 years of age. Will the republic survive?" That's the question that she always poses, Dr. Gibbs. So help me to understand what are we seeing on No King's Day? You're seeing the police push back in Chicago, in Oregon, everywhere. I mean, what are we looking at? It just
Well,
continues. It seems like it escalates every day.
we're looking at a situation of the country coming apart to some extent. That we have this enormous fissure in the country that's roughly 50-50 between those who support Donald Trump and MAGA and those who detest Donald Trump and MAGA. And I honestly think some of this is fundamental issues. Some of this are symbolic issues I think could actually be adjudicated. I think if there are greater restraint and wisdom on both sides. Um, the amount of attention given, let us say, to symbolic things like gender neutral pronouns, I'm amazed at how much attention has been given to that.
Mhm.
But also on the issue of immigration, for example, the left is not always, I mean, what Trump is doing on immigration is just awful and so brazenly unconstitutional. It's really disturbing. But the fact of the matter is that a majority of the public is very concerned about immigration. And the Democratic Party and the activist left have largely adopted a position of what amounts to something pretty close to open borders. And the public is not ready for that yet. Um, this is a new idea in American politics. For a long time, uh, the activist left and the Democratic Party did see the need for some restrictions on open borders. Bernie Sanders, for example, in 2016, was asked about open borders, and he said, that's a Koch brothers idea. Okay, he doesn't support that. That's bad for unions. That's bad for wages. He doesn't support that. Nobody, no Democrat, certainly no Democrat on the left of the end of the party could say that now. It's become a matter of dogma that basically we need open borders. And I think that's a big mistake because the public is simply not ready for that.
Mhm.
And had it not been for this open borders policy, we wouldn't have Donald Trump. There are all sorts of things that I think really could be subject to compromise if people were willing to compromise. Um, and I think we'd be better off with a compromise rather than mass violence, because I feel where this is going. Um,
Why do
young
you feel it's heading in that direction, if I may ask you that?
Well, we already had a lot of violence. We've had assassination attempts and actual assassinations on both sides of the aisle. We have people talking about violence and the need for violence. There are a lot of guns out there, a lot of guns, and a lot of people know how to use the guns, mostly on the right, which is why I'm more afraid of violence from the right, just simply because the firepower is greater from that direction. Um, and so I do fear that mass violence is where this is headed. We discussed this before on your show, and I suspect that is a real risk now. And I just wonder, is it really worth it? My answer is no, it's not.
Mhm.
And it'd be much better if some of these cultural issues would come to some kind of a compromise. Some of these things are real substantive, like abortion rights, things like active discrimination and so on, affirmative action. These are real issues. Some of these are not real issues, at least not in my opinion. Again, symbolic things like gender neutral pronouns, I think we could just do out the whole discussion personally. I don't think it's that important. But I think overall, what I'd like to see more attention on is the issue of wealth inequality in this country and economic inequality, which receives insufficient attention. I think one of the reasons is these culture war issues. These culture war issues. I think we could have more agreement on the need to redistribute wealth and economic privilege in this country if we could get beyond the cultural issues, which is one of the things I find very disturbing, is how this is such an enormous distraction.
Well, let me ask you this: think that um, do you think that lurking underneath these protests and this heightened activity in America,
Yeah.
that some of it is the economic uncertainty? I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
the fact is we have had $1 trillion taken from our healthcare system. More and more people are getting concerned as their eyes are opening. I know several people I've spoken with in the past few days who are wondering how they will be able to afford healthcare should this
Yeah.
go. And they were saying, wait a minute, I can't let the Democrats, they can't move, because if they move, I will not have health insurance. More and more people are losing their jobs. Um, Bernie Sanders says, 100 million people will be lost to AI. I've spoken to some other people. They say, well, maybe not that many, but a whole lot of folks will be. Just think of the law firms. You're going to eliminate a whole class of first year and second year associates because AI can do the research. They'll let that,
Paralegal,
you know.
paralegals, yeah.
Yeah. And so help me to understand what are some of the other drivers of what we are looking at? Because I think that, of course, immigration is an issue, but I just can't help but feel that there's something else going on because we've had all these firings this year. I mean, so much has happened in such a short period of time, Dr. Gibbs.
Well, I've seen it that what you've had is a classic strategy by the wealthy classes since the 1970s. I mean, I've documented this at length for the 70s in my book, that the wealthy had a plan, and it indeed was a plan, there's no doubt about it, to redistribute wealth upwards in the 70s. Ultimately, it was implemented beginning at the end of the 70s and into the 80s. And the question is, how do you implement a plan like that is going to be harmful to the majority in a democracy where people vote? And the answer was wedge issues, culture wars, all right? And so I think a lot of culture wars, this goes back, of course, to the 1890s, and the populist movement was very big then. there's a lot of concern about interracial alliances, including even in the South, in places like Georgia. And so the solution was Jim Crow. If you can divide the working classes, then you don't have to worry about populism anymore. You don't have to worry about wealth redistribution. There's no doubt that that was one of the reasons you had an intensification of Jim Crow in the 1890s. That's been documented by people like C. Van Woodward. Um, we've had this iterated again and again and again and again. In the 70s, as I said, there was an upsurge of this, of using wedge issues. Race was clearly one of them. Another was culture. Another was focusing on religion, those who were religious versus those who were not religious. And there's no doubt about it that this was used very instrumentally and cynically by people who wanted to gain majority support for a program that involved helping the very rich at the expense of everyone else. That, in other words, if everyone was distracted enough, they wouldn't see what's going on in terms of economics, and they'd go along with it passively. That's exactly what happened. And I think that's been playing out again and again and again. That's one of the reasons I really don't like culture wars. I just don't like them because I think that this is playing into a strategy. This is playing into a very. If you look very carefully at what the people were not only doing but saying, they're saying in private that this was their strategy. This wasn't accidental. This was intentional.
Well, Attorney Woods, this is resonating with you. Why?
Because all too often still right now I hear conversations like why are we, some of your viewers and listeners, why are we wasting our time helping the migrants? Why are we wasting our time helping people that didn't help us? And those are further distractions from what the real issues are. But unfortunately we have to reckon with that, right? We still have to find space and we still have to create safe environments for people to express their frustrations, right? So while the three of us can say, yes, it's a distraction, and, Professor Gibbs, I don't like culture wars, we can all say that here. But for the people that have a visceral reaction and are feeling what they are feeling, for whatever their lived experiences are, we still have to simultaneously create spaces to have that conversation, because we're only going to be able to go as far as we can go until we actually reckon with the people who feel as though their jobs were taken away, or that they feel as though somehow or another their movements have not been supported by other groups, because there are still people who still feel that way, right? And so I'm also interested in creating an opportunity for us to have those honest conversations where we need to have them, and to speak very frankly about what job exactly did you not get because of somebody else, or what has really actually led you to believe this untruth that's easy for me to say from my point of view, but maybe it's not as easy for you to see from where you're situated, right? So I don't want to discount people for feeling what they feel, right? There are so many positive movements that happen between cultures that just don't get enough airtime. We need to talk more about those opportunities. I was just having this conversation yesterday with someone and literally saying this, and he said, well, we don't hear about those, or his opinion was they don't happen as often. And I said, you know what? I would challenge you to think that maybe they happen often, but they're not often heralded or celebrated. And primarily, we have to be in charge of telling our own stories of celebration, of cross-cultural unity, of movements that are working together. For those of us who are in the middle or in those spaces where we do work well together, and then be able to highlight who the common enemy is, who the oppressor truly is, and then to be able to have these very focused conversations about this living in an economy where we are so often told that there's not enough, when we know absolutely to the contrary, that there is an abundance of everything that we need in this country, but the distribution of those resources is what's really at risk. And so we wouldn't have so much of this tumultuousness in our communities if we had enough distributed in our communities where they're needed the most. But it's not because our storehouses don't have them. It's because of what you're talking about, Professor Gibbs, about the distribution, about the systemic and inequities that exist. And that's what we should really be fighting, are the systemic ways in which people are left behind, kept separated from resources, taught to buy into a spirit of lack instead of really beating down the doors for all the rich storehouses of resources that we actually have, because there is enough. But when we come together to actually fight towards that common goal, then we can actually put our efforts in the right way, in the right spaces.
And in furtherance of that point, Dr. Gibbs, I'm wondering about where we are truly. Because when I look at the white police officers confronting ICE. Well, you got brown and black and white protesters. I think that there's much more unity on the ground than we see. And yet we have the oligarchs really pushing this narrative. I mean, I think it's important for us to really to amplify that point. I mean, they have been pushing a very divisive narrative, and it's in furtherance of the book that you've written. I mean, the oligarchs, they're revolting.
Nope.
I mean, they are. I mean, this is what I see. I see them running to surveil. Like when I see Larry Ellison, gleefully buying TikTok and CBS, and what we're going to be able to do is surveil you, all the time. And yet, even with that, I see people pushing back. So help me to understand, Dr. Gibbs, just historically, where are we? Because I'm seeing all over the world a pushback. Because this is not just happening in the United States. You've got no king rallies all over the world.
I think that one of the things you're seeing is the immigration issue. I've sort of evolved on this, and that I at one point thought that the best thing is open borders because xenophobia is just kind of repulsive to me, and the idea of that is repulsive. I think what has impressed me is the numbers. If you look at the polls, uh, there's no doubt there's very high support for some kind of restrictions on immigration, and I just don't see that an open borders policy will ever be popular. Also in Europe, you're seeing the rise in both directions. In Germany, the biggest party now is the AfD, the far right-wing party, with very disturbing tendencies. In France, and Britain, same thing. And they're Trumpian type parties, and they're becoming the majority very quickly. And immigration is one of the reasons for this. And so I just wonder if it might be necessary to consider some compromise on the issue of immigration and accept some restriction on immigration. It is a fact that at lower wage levels, immigration does hurt wages. It does put strain on city services, including in cities like Chicago, if I'm not mistaken. And in light of that, I just wonder if it might be better for the country and better for everybody if some compromise is found on this issue, rather than just having fighting in the streets over it. That would be my preference. And as a general point, I do feel that in terms of reaching out to other groups, one of the groups I'd like to see reached out to are Trump voters, people who voted for Trump and mistakenly thought. I'm talking here about working class people. And originally, I started on this show, I was talking about working class whites, but now as we know, it's much broader than working class whites. It's a multiracial working class that did vote for Trump, including in my state of Arizona. And what we need to do basically is accept that a lot of these people, of course, they're misguided. I mean, it was very foolish to vote for Trump. We'll just say that flat out, just in terms of their interests. But the fact is that if we're going to really have any kind of progress socially, we really need to make an effort to reach out to a lot of these Trump voters and to accept the fact that they might say the wrong thing about this or that issue. And we just have to be a little bit more tolerant of different lifestyles and different verbal styles. And if they don't use the right way of identifying trans people or something, well, we correct them and don't make a big deal about it. I think there's a little bit too much intolerance. I'll be honest. Also, there's a certain class intolerance among people among progressives, that there's a certain intolerance for working people. And I think that needs to change. One thing that particularly stands out to my mind is Joe Rogan, who has a very big working class viewership, huge. And in 2020, he virtually endorsed Bernie Sanders. And Bernie Sanders used this as an advertisement. And there was outrage expressed among Bernie Sanders supporters. AOC boycotted his campaign for a while. And he was required essentially to distance himself from Joe Rogan, because Joe Rogan's views on gender issues or something. And I thought that was very telling and also very self-destructive, because there's simply no way we can make any kind of move towards a majority unless we have people like those who watch Joe Rogan. If we're not even going to make any effort to do that, we might as well just give up, because we're not going to get a majority. And so I think what we need is a left that's much more tolerant of different lifestyles and different verbal styles and different attitudes. And I think that I'm starting to see very big mistakes being made on the left. Let's put it that way, and the need to
Mhm.
correct those mistakes. I don't know, Tanya. If you don't mind me calling you by your first name, do you? What's your thought on that? I don't know. What do you? What I just said. What do you think?
So that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot to digest. And the tolerance conversation reminds me a lot about the '80s, and all too often, I think the people who are feeling the most oppressed and who are the farthest from the opportunity are the ones who are being asked to have the most tolerance, and that sometimes disturbs me. We are often asked to shapeshift, if you will,
Mm.
and to allow certain. And I'm certainly not trying to compare you to someone who was just recently in the news who was making excuses for certain remarks by certain people who look like you and don't look like me. And I think we all know what story we're talking about there. I wouldn't dare say that you sound like that person, but you almost sound like that person in the
Mm.
sense that the tolerance is always being asked of the people who are being oppressed. And that is the part of departure that I
I'm thinking
have
about
is
my
that
friends. I'm thinking about more my academic
I
friends at
got you, right? But I'm
university.
just
That's what
telling
I'm
you how
thinking of.
sometimes it can come out, right? Is that those of us who are on the offended end have to be more tolerant of others. Now, if David, perhaps you're saying in my community of white folks who look like me, that there is work that needs to be
Universities.
right, okay, in academia, then that certainly there's room for that conversation, because I often been saying that white folks need to talk to white folks, academics need to talk to academics,
Mm.
people need to talk to the people in their own sphere of influence, because they speak many times the same language. They understand where your pain points are, your pressure points, your roses
Yeah.
and your thorns. And so that I can highly advocate for,
Mm.
because I think there's room and the need for that as well as the cross cultural, for lack of a
Mhm.
better word, or across the groups having a deeper understanding of each other. Now, as far as it comes to progressives, rights, and lefts, I think that in this particular moment, especially, there has to be a deeper curiosity by all of the electorate about how things work. About being more curious about what the other side is saying, not necessarily in furtherance of just tolerance, but just being educated. All too often, we talk about, that the American voters are probably some of the least informed when it comes to world affairs or to issues that, impact the marketplace. Like if it doesn't have anything to do with what's going on in their cul-de-sac, then they don't know what's going on. I think that to some extent, there's sometimes a little bit of truth to that, right? And so I'd like to see our voters become more curious about how not only the system works, but how all the other sides participate in that. Because I think we're at a moment when the bipartisan, this two-party system that we've lived with for the most of this country's history is being tested, right? It's being tested at the seams in a lot of ways, because you are seeing people that are far more vocal now about saying, here are the things that I want. These are the 5 things that are important to me. I don't know where they fall. I don't know if the Democrats have this. I don't know if the Anons have it or the Republicans, but these are the 5 things that I need. And I'm going to vote for the person who closely aligns with those 5 things.
Mhm.
Because of that, I think that it is very, it is, kind of sophomoric for us to keep thinking about things along the lines of left and right. And we have to get much more savvy about that and start thinking in terms more about what are people really feeling like they need in order to be whole, to be safe, to live a productive life, regardless of where they're situated. And I think that's where the true conversation lies. That's the difficult conversations that we need to have that are not really bipartisan conversations. They are human conversations. And I think that's actually where the solution and the secret sauce lies.
But I think that's where Americans are. The plurality
Yeah.
of Americans are self-declared independents. And I can't help but think of Dr. King and Reverend and this Poor People's Campaign, because that Dr. King, he was far more palatable when he was talking about desegregation. But when he started looking at the devil's and God is in the details, he started looking at the structural problems in the country that transcended race and really that transcended all of our class distinctions. And he said, wait a minute, we've got this a little bit deeper than this black white thing. Hold on. this is this is big, 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 big. And when he went after the military industrial complex,
Mm.
and I saw a young boy from a soldier, and he would have been my child. He could have been my child. If I had a child, he would have been my age. And the reporter asked him, if you could say something to people 50 years from now, what would you say? He'd say, stop sending your children to fight basically some rich man's wars. Stop doing that. and he was white, and he was sending a message that Dr. King said to red, yellow, black, brown, and white. That's been the whole thrust of the rainbow. I think we got to talk to our people. You got to talk to academics. Whites have to have an honest conversation with whites, and Jews have to have honest conversations, and on and on and on and on. But at the end of the day, if we don't come out of that and understand that we're all under the same boot, we're not going to get anywhere. I mean, and I think that's where, and whenever we get to that place where we can kind of touch, what, because George Washington said, look, he didn't say no, he said no kings, and he said no parties either. He said work for the people. He's the last independent president we had. We haven't had that. So, I mean, Dr. Gibbs, I mean, I think point well taken, Attorney Woods, point well taken. And I'm trying to figure out how we can move forward, because if if the Democrats do not hold out, and if you don't get some more Marjorie Taylor Greens and people like that, people are not going to have health insurance, and it will be a disaster for Americans.
Yeah,
Period.
100%. May I address Solomon's comment a little bit earlier, not to go
Sure.
back, but I think it's vitally important when the public gets an opportunity to be heard, and you do such a great job of that, Santita, on your show. Solomon talked about, letting ICE do their job, right?
Mhm.
I think we talked about this before. The efforts that you see here in Chicago are not an effort to stop anybody from doing their job. That is not what is happening. What we are trying to do is keep people safe while people are supposedly doing their job. Now, there are some other folks who are fighting whether or not their job is what they say they're doing and what they're actually doing. But Solomon, for a moment, there are people that are being hurt. There are neighborhoods that you can't even step out on the street because the sirens might start to go, and you might start to see a caravan of military vehicles shooting down your street, and might have to snatch your kids out of the way. So there's real violence that's happening, and not because people are protesting against it, but they are literally bringing the violence with them when they are throwing tear gas and tear bombs and pepper bullets at people, because people do have the right to be able to stand there and bear witness to what is happening. There's nothing wrong with that, and nor is it an interference. But when those very people who are bearing witness are then peppered with bullets, when they are when tear gas is being thrown into a crowd, which a federal judge has said you cannot do that, and they are still doing that. They are flying in the face of our due process. They are flying in the face of our courts and making a mockery of these decisions that have been adjudicated in a court of law. That we will not tolerate. And as people, we are not going to stand by and allow that. To the point about people coming into the United States, what many people do not realize, but you hear in some small conversations, is that the route to citizenship is not a straightforward one. It is not designed for people to actually be successful at if you are from a certain country. And this country still has what they call country quota limits. That means that not every country can allow the same amount of people into the United States on a pathway to citizenship. It is a very unequal system. It is not very equitable, and much of it is shrouded in mysteriousness and mythology. And so it is those systems of entering the United States safely and lawfully that need to be addressed. But to suggest that when people come to this country seeking a better way of life,
Mhm.
that they are merely just sitting on the rolls and rosters of our public systems and draining from our economy and not actually contributing, that is not actually what happens. People pay taxes, people work jobs, people do contribute to our economy. But what is really at issue is how we go about doing that in a way that is not discriminatory, that is not xenophobic, that is equitable, and that is transparent to the American people. And that we can talk about and begin to either reform, or as Dr. Gibbs spoke about, maybe it just needs to be overhauled altogether. So before we talk about the way that we are enforcing the current policies, we also have to have a simultaneous conversation about the policies and whether they are righteous or not to begin with.
Because Dr. Gibbs, I will say this: we have only a few more minutes left here. 38,000 Ukrainians were brought to Chicago during the conflict at the beginning of it. We don't know how many more have been brought in. They were given Social Security cards. There is even an organization, the Self Reliance. That's the title of it. They're not relying on self. They were sponsored in. They were onboarded in it, and I'm mindful of the fact that our governor is of Ukrainian descent, as was our Secretary of State. Come on now. No one's talking about them. 38,000 people. That's a whole lot of people to take at one time. But that happened here. They're not up for discussion. It's these brown people who are brought in here to do the farm work, who are brought in by corporations who have memos of understanding with our Department of State, because they're brought in to do this. So I mean, what is this? I mean, as if Europe is not has not been built on the backs of these migrants and immigrants who are coming their way. I mean, when I look at King Charles and his mother and these jewels that they have stolen from all these countries that they refuse to get back, and these artifacts, I'm like, are you serious? Do you all know? Do you realize that your wealth, you're standing on these people's backs?
You know, one of the things about the Ukrainians, I suppose, one of the things that has to be noted is one of the reasons you're having immigrant flows into the United States and also into Europe is American-sponsored wars. I mean, a lot of the immigration into Europe is the long-term effect of the war on terror, the overthrow of the Iraqi and Afghan governments. Honestly, the United States' role, and I'll be very frank about this, in provoking the war in Ukraine, and we did indeed provoke it and then block negotiations. Its documentary record on that is very complete. That's the reason we're having so much immigrant flows from Ukraine into the United States, including into Chicago. The imposition of neoliberalism in much of Latin America, most notably Mexico, that unquestionably increased the immigrant flows from Mexico. These things don't come out of nowhere. They come out of concrete policies. And so changing these policies that destabilize countries, whether through neoliberalism or war or covert operations, that's something that needs more discussion in the context of the issue of immigration. And not only here, but also in Europe as well. But I think more generally, what really I think we who do not support Trump need to take into account is Donald Trump has dominated American politics for 10 years now. And he's not any weaker now than he was 10 years ago. If anything, he's stronger. Half the country, roughly speaking, about 45%, supports Donald Trump in spite of everything. And so everything that the opponents of Trump have done to oppose him have either been ineffective or made him stronger. And I think it's time to take stock of the situation, ask what have we been doing wrong and what can we do differently that can change the situation, and to think outside the box. And I think one of the problems is we haven't been aiming for a majority. What you need in a democracy is a majority. 50-50 doesn't do it. You need more than 50%, which means the base has to be expanded. And we need to do something differently, fundamentally differently from what we've been doing for the last 10 years if we want to have any impact. And that means asking some uncomfortable questions about, like, what have we been doing wrong? And I think we need to start having those conversations.
Well, I only have a couple of minutes, literally. No, I have a little under a minute for everyone, literally. So I want you to go, Attorney Woods. West Side Justice Center. You've got to get in touch with her wherever you are in the country. Get it? Yeah, I know I'm giving you the whole country because that's what.
Yes, we'll take it. You can reach us at westsidejustice.org or at 773-940-2213. What we can offer you today is those palm cards that I talked about, where you know your rights, know your resources, know your risks, as well as being able to help coordinate and help develop community know your rights workshops. So reach out to us at westsidejustice.org, 773-940-2213, because we keep us safe.
Dr. David Gibbs.
Oh, I don't know. I think I said everything I have to say at this point. Thanks for having me on again. It's been a pleasure being on with you, Tanya Woods. And have a good day, everybody.
It is a joy. And as we go, many of you have been talking about something that I have not been free to talk about until now. One of the founding members of the family here on our show, Dr. Dwight McKee, made his transition last week. In fact, he was with us on the air just days before he passed. He'd been very, we did not know that he had lung, liver, heart, and kidney failure. And yet, in his last few moments on earth, he wanted to talk to you, he wanted to set the record straight. He wanted to, in his last event that he had at Operation Push in July, Dr. Cornell West came in, and it was about 6 hours, as Dwight would have us do. And it was, what do we tell our children? And I know he had enormous respect for you, Dr. Gibbs. He felt that you were a man of profound integrity, um,
I felt the
and
same way about him.
insights. Well, you all were always the viewers and the listeners listened to you and said, "Oh, look at these people. Where are they coming from?" But Attorney Woods, I know he would have been fired up by you, and he's someone I don't know a world without him. Everybody, I've known him since I was one. He was like my big brother, and I miss him definitely, and I know you do too. So there it is. I dedicate these shows going forward to Dwight McKee because he, aside from my parents, was that one person I would call and say, "What did you think about my singing, about the show, but it just about the issues?" And I thank God for him. And I know he thought the world of all of you, which is why he wanted to be with you up until just days before he drew his last breath. And may God bless you, Dwight McKee, sending him so much love. He is now at rest. And I thank God for that. I love you all. And remember, no King's Day. As my mother says, no Dictator's Day. She said,
Some people have signs out that say that.
thank you very much.
They do. So your mother started that,
I
obviously.
think so.
They must have heard her.
She said that. She said, people
I
love
just saw
kings.
somebody send me a sign that said no dictators.
That's right. Thank you. My mother said, people love kings and queens. Are you kidding me? She said, that's too close to Dr. King for me. She said, no dictators. We don't want dictators. I said, you know what? I
I'll
cannot
take it.
That's the point.
Okay.
So I love you, everybody. May God bless you. I'm going to have a show for you tomorrow after No King's Day. And at Rainbow Push, we will be joined by Abby Phillips of CNN Sunday at 5:30. She has written a book on Reverend Jackson, and she's going to have a book signing at Rainbow Push. And I think it'll be very interesting to hear what she has to say. We're going to have the governor there, and Senator Durbin, and the mayor, and so many people. I think Reverend Sharp and a lot of people coming in to talk about this book, to talk about this great man, Reverend Jesse Jackson, and this what a life, what an epic journey he has been on. You can't make this up. Only by the grace of God could you have had the life that he has had, and it's not over yet. That's right. I was talking with him last night about all of these things. And so may God bless you, everybody. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, the Santita Jackson Show.